after about 4 or 5 weeks of trying to do it local, these places.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. It is good to be with you this morning. My name is Joanne Swank, and I am your worship associate for today's service. If you're new to us, we hope you will make yourself known in the live chat so that we can say hello. And we can also hope that you might email our administrator at officeuu.org so that we can include you in our regular news blasts, which relate all of the excellent things that are going on here at UUCGN. There is so much going on here, so we hope you will sign up and check out the email notices that are sent out each week. Our news blasts offer you links to all sorts of learning and fellowship opportunities. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., our Mindful Monday Forum features our own Cindy Nair, founder and CEO of the Center for Health Engagement, with a presentation titled The Profound Insecurity of Class-Based Healthcare. This Wednesday evening forum, February 24th at 7 p.m., Progressive Voices Speak Out lecture series offers the final presentation by Jim Kenney. The theme for this year's series, Diagnosing Our Political Infection, and Wednesday's lecture is titled The Great Transition from Trump to Biden and Harris. Look for details for this and more upcoming events in this morning's Sunday news, or check our website at www.uunaples.org. During these 3 weeks, while our minister, Reverend Tony Fisher, is away, we are excited to welcome Rev. Barbro Hansson to our congregation and our pulpit. Originally from Sweden, Reverend Hansson came to the U.S. in 1974 and was introduced to the world of Unitarian Universalism by her American husband. After acclimating to a new culture, Barbro became an active lay leader, first at the local level and then at the district level. She felt the call to ministry at the event she will speak about today. Reverend Hansson graduated from Meadville Lombard Theological School in 1998 and has served congregations in Harrisburg, Virginia, Plattsburgh, New York, and Brattleboro, Vermont, before retiring from full ministry in 2014. We are grateful to have her with us, and we are also thankful to have Steve Espinoza for leading our hymns this morning. And now, let's settle ourselves into this time of worship with the morning's prelude, You'll Never Walk Alone by Stu Shelton. Come, come, whoever you are. Come with your hurts, your imperfections, your places that feel raw and exposed. Come, come, whoever you are. Come with your strengths and the world shudders to hold. Come with your hopes that it seems no one wants to hear. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, we will make a place for you. We will build a home together. Ours is no caravan of despair. We walk together. Come, yet again come. Please share with me the chalice lighting words that you'll find on your screen. The chalice will be lit this morning by John. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the unity we seek. And now, we will hear Steve Espinoza with Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. 3 times. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Good morning. It is good to be with you again. I am very grateful to Kristen Michette for making contact with me last fall. And I'm deeply grateful to your minister, the Reverend Tony, for inviting me to preach while he is away. I would, of course, prefer to be with you in Naples. I was there 8 years ago with my husband, and we so enjoyed walking on the warm, soft sand at Loudermilk Beach and exploring your beautiful downtown, Fifth Avenue, where we happened upon an incredible art show. And the Naples Concert Band was playing in the park. It was just so incredible, so beautiful, sunny, warm, relaxing. Last week, Sunday, I spoke about what happened at the 1993 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the lessons I learned from the TJ birthday ball debacle. Next Sunday, I plan to talk about 3 significant racial controversies that took place within our association. Today, I will speak a little bit about myself, of being a white woman coming to America and learning about race and racism. But first, I want to share a memory with you as a beginning. I am standing in a large room. together with about 40 or 50 other Unitarian Universalists. We are attending a Creating a Jubilee World workshop. And we have just completed our first activity. We have collectively created a timeline of history, a history of racism and progress toward racial justice in America. It begins 1492 and goes through 1994 with all the historic and personal events and movements that we could remember. We've each written in on that newsprint on the wall specific incidences. Of course, we have slavery. We have the Declaration of Emancipation. We have the Civil War. And then Jim Crow laws. And we have the Civil Rights Movement. And as I'm looking at this incredible image in front of me, this wall of history, it dawns on me how intricately the racial justice work and racism are. There is a clear relationship as you look at the timeline. And the image that comes to my mind is looking at the bottom half and the movement. It's like a sea monster moving, Leviathan. And it rears its ugly face from time to time, regularly. And each time it has been empowered, it is more powerful and insidious. White backlash. It's painful to see. But looking at the upper half, that gives me hope. The movement of ever increased racial justice activities and accomplishments. It is clear from our timeline that over time, racial justice happens. Someone in our midst is humming a familiar tune. Others join in. We begin to sing. And then someone says, stop, stop. Let's be intentional. Let's not sing someday, because that's, someday may never happen. Let's sing, we shall overcome today. Today.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome today. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand today. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free today.
Each week during our service, we set aside a time of community, a time to recognize that individually and together we have our ups and downs, a time to share with one another our individual joys or sorrows, and in doing so, build bonds of love and understanding. Not being together in person for this time is one of the hardest parts of our forced separation. We may value the social aspect of congregational life, but these moments of sharing on Sunday bind us together, reminding us all of our humanity and of our compassion. The Caring Corner, now being sent out every Tuesday, is a way for each of us to share our news with the UUCGN community and to learn and respond to others' joys and sorrows. If you have something you would like to share in this way, please email our office administrator at office@uunaples.org. This morning, we remember those in our lives who are struggling right now or who are celebrating milestones, and we honor those in the wider community who are on the front lines of health care or in the front lines of justice work. Those who have lost loved ones to the virus or whose lives have been affected by its ongoing economic impact. If you are thinking of someone right now, please take this time to light a candle or say a name or remember them in some way. As we enter our time of meditation this morning, it might be good to acknowledge that our lives are always in flux, buffered by things within and beyond our scope to change. Thus, it is sometimes better to lean into the motion and find within new ways to live.
Here is a poem by the Swedish author and poet Karin Boye. She was born in 1900, and the title of this poem is "Of Course It Hurts." Of course it hurts when buds burst. Otherwise, why would spring hesitate? Why would all our fervent longing be bound in the frozen, bitter haze? The bud was the casing all winter. What is this new thing which consumes and bursts? Of course it hurts when buds burst. Pain for that which grows and for that which envelops. Of course it is hard when drops fall. Trembling with fear, they hang heavy, clamber on the branch, swell and slide. The weight pulls them down. They cling, hard to be uncertain, afraid, and divided. Hard to feel the deep pulling and calling, yet sit there and just quiver, hard to want to stay and to want to fall. Then, at the point of agony and when all is beyond help, the trees' buds burst as in jubilation. Then, when fear no longer exists, the branches, drops, tumble in a shimmer, forgetting that they were afraid of the new, forgetting that they were fearful of the journey, feeling for a second their greatest security, resting in the trust that creates the world. I was born and raised in Sweden. My childhood was rather idyllic. Everyone around me looked like me, very Swedish and very fair-skinned, at least for the most part. Not everyone had blonde hair and blue eyes. I remember stories about people who were different. Actually, these stories were warnings more than stories. There were groups of Roma people who would pass through our community from time to time in their caravans, sometimes camping by the creek nearby. In Swedish, they were called zigenare, and we were told to beware of them, and that they were likely to steal whatever they could find. And we were also warned about those Finnish immigrants, who were good for nothing. All they were good for was drinking vodka and fighting with knives, or so the stories went. By the time I was a teenager, my sisters and I had friends whose Jewish parents had escaped Nazi Germany. But that was never really talked about. There were also fairly large numbers of people from Southern Europe, Italians, Greeks, and Spaniards, all more or less guest workers, at least to begin with. By the time I began my working career at age 16, my immediate supervisor was a Spanish man. He and I got along really well. He was a good man and a very good supervisor who took me in under his wings to train me and teach me about reading architectural drawings and figuring out the logistics and costs involved with professional custodial services. Our boss, the owner of this small family-owned business, was an immigrant from Estonia. His wife and children all worked in the company. Well, I did not last at that company and ended up, when I was about 17 years old, working at the Swedish Postal Service as a mail carrier. And that, that was a good job. I was out delivering mail. But this particular day, I was probably about 18 or 19 years old at the time. All the other carriers had left for their routes, and I was staying in that day to sort the late morning mail that had just been delivered by a truck. As usual, I wore my uniform, a drab, dark gray thing. Did not do anything for my looks, but it was a work uniform. Sorting this mail meant that I had to grab the sacks of mail from where they had been thrown on the floor and lift them up on the table, the sorting table, and then shaking out all the letters, all the pieces of mail in the sack, which meant really shaking and a lot of dust flying about, dust that would settle on me. So this was not a career for people who wanted to appear attractive at all times. So this one day, I was sorting the mail at the sorting table, and in walks a person of color, a Black man. He was dressed immaculately, and he was handsome looking. I wanted to crawl under the table and hide because I felt like the ugly duckling, and I didn't want anyone to see me except my coworkers. Anyway, he comes up to me because I was the only one around, and he asks where he can find the postmaster. So I take him to the postmaster's office and then go back to my work of sorting mail, dusty, dirty mail. And then when his meeting with the postmaster is over, he comes back, comes toward me, and he strikes up a conversation with me and ends up asking me out. And all this time, I'm thinking about how good looking he is and how terribly uncomfortable I am in my uniform under all that dust, looking as unattractive as I could. Well, he asks me out, and I decline. And he goes on his way. Many, many years later, that memory came back to me. And I wondered what was really going through my head. I mean, he was the first Black person that I ever encountered in real life and had a conversation with. Why did I decline? Was it because I felt so unattractive and he was so incredibly handsome that I just could not cross that divide? Or did I decline because he was Black?
Now is the time for us to express our gratitude for this community, its work, its vision, and all the ways in which it nourishes our lives. From its welcoming doors and sheltering walls to its good and generous people, from the sanctuary of its memorial garden to its outreach to the wider community. For all these things and for the ways it works its magic in your life, the morning's offering for the ongoing mission of this congregation will be gratefully received. Please consider mailing a contribution today. The address is here on the screen, or you can go to www.uunaples.org, where you'll find a donate button and where you can find out a lot more about this congregation.
I never really entertained the idea of leaving Sweden, not until I was 20 years old. It was love that did it. You see, on vacation on one of the beautiful Greek islands, I met an American guy. Mark was serving in the US Army stationed in Greece, and he and I met during one of his weekends off duty. It wasn't exactly love at first sight, but to make a long story short, we were married a few months later. It was Mark who introduced me to Unitarian Universalism. When he did, it was a freeing experience. It was as if a locked door had swung open and I could enter into a more meaningful life and existence. My first 10 years in the US were mostly about assimilating to a new culture and finding my way around. I don't remember interacting much with people of color, though I do remember my mother-in-law showing me around in Charlottesville, Virginia, where she lived, and how shocked I was to see the difference between white neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods. All this time, I was, of course, taking in covert racism without knowing it. Coming to America, which I did, by the way, on February 22nd, 1974, has been quite a journey of learning about race and racism and white privilege. It's been like peeling an onion, and at times tears filled my eyes and ran down my cheeks. Of course, it hurts. Once, as a lay leader who planned the worship services at the UU Fellowship, I was confronted about my choice of reading selections. I had asked a member of the congregation to do an Uncle Remus story, Brer Rabbit. I think it was February, Black History Month. Bill did a great job telling the story, but right after, it was made clear in no uncertain terms to me, to Bill, and to all in attendance that Uncle Remus stories are offensive, full of stereotypes and not representative of Black people. I was horrified and utterly embarrassed. It was a painful learning experience, but a needed one. A few years later, the Ku Klux Klan were coming to our town, Stanton, Virginia. It was 1987. While some people preferred to ignore the KKK presence and stayed at home, many of us lined the street along the route, holding placards and signs protesting the KKK and racism. It was a profound experience, one that helped me understand the depth of racism and that it was a cultural and social institution. 1987 was also the year I began to serve on the then Thomas Jefferson District of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And it was not long before I began attending the TJ District's annual anti-racism conferences. That first wall of history is forever etched in my mind, but there was so much more. During those conferences, I heard heart-wrenching stories about racism. One of those made a deep impression on me. A Black woman told us about coloring as a young child with crayons. You know, Crayola crayons. She pulled out one in particular, peach, maybe a lighter shade than that. But it was identified as skin. Not her skin. No. Of course, it hurts. At the 1993 General Assembly in Charlotte, North Carolina, a whole day had been set aside for racial justice programming. It took place after the TJ birthday ball debacle. The Racial Justice Day began with Dr. Cornel West speaking. His book, Race Matters, had been published that spring. I was mesmerized by both his presence and his message. When I departed from Charlotte, I had his book, Race Matters, in my bag. It was about that time that I became creating a Jubilee World anti-racism trainer. We were always 4 trainers at these weekend workshops, always a Black man and Black woman, a white man and white woman. And we worked closely together to plan activities and who would lead what. In 1994, when I entered seminary at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, Mel Hoover, who was then on staff at the UUA, hooked me up with Joseph Barnt, an American Lutheran pastor and anti-racism activist who co-founded Crossroads Ministry, a Chicago-based racial justice advocacy group. I learned a lot volunteering at Crossroads and being in the midst of wonderful, competent, passionate, justice-seeking men and women. Other than Joe Barnt, I was the only white person. The layers of the onion were peeling away, but my thinking during this time was something like, well, Barbro, you did not grow up in this country with a history of slavery and racism. Naturally, you're not racist. Ha. That changed during that first year in seminary when I read another Cornel West book, Prophecy Deliverance. In a section about the genealogy of racism, West wrote about Carl von Linné, the famous 18th century Swedish botanist and naturalist, and how Linné was one of the very first to categorize human beings into distinct races. I quote, "For Linnaeus, there were 4 races, Homo europaeus, Homo asiaticus, Homo afer, and Homo americanus." It is quite apparent that Linnaeus implicitly evaluated the observable characteristics of the racial classes of people. For example, compare Linnaeus's description of the European with the African. European, white, sanguine, brawny, hair abundantly flowing, eyes blue, gentle, acute, inventive, covered with close vestments, governed by customs. African, black, phlegmatic, relaxed, hair black, frizzled, skin silky, nose flat, lips tumid, crafty, indolent, negligent, anoints himself with grease, governed by caprice. End of quote. If that is not racism, I don't know what is. Established by a fellow Swede. It floored me. Wrestling with that new knowledge was agonizing. But that is when I finally began to understand that I had grown up in a society with institutionalized and systemic racism woven into its very fabric. And that I have been influenced by centuries-old cultural messages that people with white skin are superior. Of course, it hurts. And yes, it has been challenging and painful to comprehend the complexities of culture and racism. It is very much like peeling an onion with multiple layers of innocence, ignorance, denial. I have taken for granted the white privilege norms, values, and assumptions I grew up with. I return often to that image I shared earlier, standing in front of the wall of history and noting the relationship between racial justice and racism. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that we are now experiencing a leviathan of racism. It has been there all along, sometimes overt, sometimes covert. Right now, it takes the form of white backlash. The process of becoming aware, of opening our eyes and ears and hearts and minds to deeper understandings of racism and white supremacy is only a beginning. I applaud you, the congregation of the UU congregation of Greater Naples, for the decision to take a stronger stand in the social justice movement, focusing on racism and other oppressions. To dismantle institutional and systemic racism and to end white supremacy will take all of us doing our part, and it is my hope that we, Unitarian Universalists, will live our shared values, be intentionally engaged, and work together for racial justice. May it be so.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Before I give the words of benediction, special thanks to our people behind the scenes. Dan Goodsit, John Forsyth are always here every Sunday. Stu Shelton, our pianist, how lucky we are. And of course, the beautiful and rich voice of Steve Espinoza. Thank you so much. Our benediction this morning comes from Swedish statesman Dag Hammarskjöld. Each day, the first day, each day a life. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back. It must be held out empty, for the past must only be reflected in its polish, its shape, its capacity.